Good day to you, sir. Chapter 1 is trailering. All right. So the proper way to trailer it, notice, first of all, that it's fairly level with the ground, right? You need to get you a tow hitch that has the proper either rise or drop for whatever vehicle you're using in order to get this level. Next thing is, you've got a new winch here. I put this on end of last year. I add this strap, but it's not absolutely necessary. I just do it to give it just a kind of a second, you know, just in case this thing lets go or breaks or whatever. But also this kind of helps it keep it from bouncing, because it is a fairly big engine for this hull, so there's a lot of weight in the back, and so that's why I put that on there. Obviously I usually take the seats out of the holes and I tuck them down just so they're not catching air, and I strap these seats down. The middle one doesn't actually have a strap on it, but whatever. Always make sure this cover is on when you're towing, because without this cover the canopy will blow up like a balloon, and it'll catch air and it'll probably rip it right off the hinges, is my guess. You can see there's all kinds of wheel bearing grease flopping around everywhere. You'll have to clean that off at some point. I maybe put a little bit too much in there, but these, if you pull this plastic cover off, there's a grease fitting under there, and you can hook a grease gun up to it. When you hook a grease gun up to it, it will push out the old grease, and it puts the new grease in the back of the bearing hub, and it pushes the old grease out. You need to do that basically once a year is how often I do it. I tried to fix this bracket, but it broke, so you have to get you a new license plate bracket. These obviously have to be on when you're trailering. It makes sure that it gives it just, you know, extra holding power so it doesn't slide off the back. Obviously this is how this thing hooks up. There's a little, like a quick pin here to hook this to there. Make sure your plug is out when it's out of the water, and put it back in before you put it in the water. I usually put a strap here. You don't have to, but I do, because without it, if you take a sharp turn or something, this motor's, you know, the weight of it will shift and it'll flop back and forth, and I just don't want to put all that stress on this little joint here. That's basically it for trailering. I mean, obviously, you know, there's a certain rating on it, tongue weight and everything. You know, a regular F-150 is fine for it. You can tow this boat with like a Ford Ranger, or like a I used to tow it with a Ford Escape a lot, and I'd have to, you know, take it easy. Really not because the Ford Escape had any trouble pulling it, but just because you know, there's only so much braking power on a smaller vehicle, so you want to make sure it has enough braking power to stop it. That's really the big thing. All right, we're going to talk about starting procedures real quick. So obviously, number one, you got to have it in the water, with the motor in the water. You want this part under the water, or you've got the I've got a muzzle in here that you can put around these vents. It's like a suction cup, and you hook it up to a garden hose, okay? When it's running properly, it'll spit water out of this little hole. If water is not spitting out of this hole, it's very likely that it's not getting cooled, and you're going to overheat the engine, and you got a problem plugging it up. So that's kind of your, they call it the telltale. That tells you if it's running right or not, usually. This is your up and down. If you're like in the water or whatever, you can hit this down to lower it. But to begin with, this is the vent for the gas. So it'll come all the way off. You don't want to do that, obviously. I usually go, when it's all the way tight, I'll undo it like, you know, half, 3/4 a turn. That's enough to vent the gas tank, okay? And that's where you fill it up, by the way. This is your primer bulb. You got to make, so the gas tank, you need to pull the gas into the line using this, and you just pump it, I don't know, between 5 and 10 times until it gets real firm, and that's how you know there's gas in the line. So from here, the fuel pump will pull enough gas to get it going, and then it has, you know, it pumps gas in naturally. One thing you always want to check is the oil level. I'll tell you more about that later, but this tank right here, you can see there's oil in it. You have to add oil to this because it's an oil injected motor. So as you're running the motor, it's using this oil and actually burning it up and spitting it out the exhaust. If you run out of oil, you will toast your engine, okay? This engine is a two-stroke, basically. It's an oil injected two-stroke, which means it's gonna inject this oil into the gasoline mix automatically, and it's burning it up. It's burning that oil and spitting it out. So that oil has to be refilled with a specific kind of oil. I've left you some of that oil in this cubby up here. It's basically 2-cycle outboard oil. Same thing. This right here is actually a spare oil tank. I bought it and just hadn't replaced it yet, but the sensor inside the original oil tank went bad, so the engine thinks that it's out of oil because it's a sensor that sounds an alarm when the oil's low, so you don't, toast your engine. So you'll see inside there when you pull the cover off, I pulled the wire to the sensor so that it just doesn't know that it's basically so that the alarm didn't keep going off. But if you want to have the alarm, which I think is a good idea, then you need to replace that new tank. Okay, so you make sure you got oil in there. Usually that oil tank right there will last about the same amount of time as a full tank of gas. This thing holds like 20 or 22 gallons of gas. I can usually go out probably 5 or 6 days on the lake, spend half to a full day each time, and that'll usually burn up about 1 tank of gas. So honestly, even when I've gone out every other weekend through a whole summer, through like a 3-month period, I've never used more than 2 tanks of gas in a whole summer. Down here there's a switch. Up is run, down is off, okay? You want to flip that to run, and then there's a button down here and a trigger here. You want to hold down the button, pull the trigger, and push it forward until it locks in this little position here, okay? When it's locked in this position here, you can then put the key in and turn it to start and then crank it, and it will start. Having it in this position gives it more gas, so it revs up and warms up. But because you've pressed this down, this disengages the transmission, so the propeller's not turning, okay? So you'll start it that way. The choke is actually the key itself. You can press it. So when you're cranking it, you can press in the key in order to choke it to kind of get extra gas. Once it's run for a minute or two and you got it good and warmed up, then all you gotta do is pull this back until it clicks and it locks like that. Now it's just idling. Now, without pressing that, you can either put it into reverse or into forward, and the transmission will engage and you'll move. This is your lights for like when you're parked. This is the bilge actually. This is the aerator pump for your live well. And frankly, I forgot what that one is. You do have miles per hour here and RPMs and fuel. The gauges work intermittently, so good luck with that. I just say that to say don't always trust the gauges.